In this video lecture, we're going to take a look at the process of gathering and analyzing needs analysis, the data specifically, what we can do. Now, it's one thing to create your needs analysis instrument. This is the structure, the template, and the instrument that you're going to use to collect the data. Now, that's in itself an important part of the process, but the other important part is just exactly what you're going to do while you are collecting your data, and also what you're going to do once you have collected the data. Once you need to go and process the data to get all of the insights that you need to get out of that information so that you can start making clear and strategic decisions as you're building your ESP course. So that's exactly what we're going to take a look at throughout this video lecture and in the next few slides. So I'll show you some insights, the sort of instruments that we can get, the techniques that you can use, and also we'll get just a little bit into the process of working with the data just to give you some insights and some clarity as to what exactly has to be done in the general sense. Okay, let's get started with this video lecture. As we're getting into this topic for this video lecture, let's just do a quick reminder on what exactly needs analysis is and why it's so important to ESP. It's not just about talking informally with one of your stakeholders. This could be an employer, this could be a manager, this could even be somebody that's directly being affected in some way because he or she does not have the language skills to do his or her job. So it's not just about doing that informal conversation. It's really about being systematic, collaborative, and context specific, to be exact. This means that the needs analysis is, in a way, how using these strategies, systematic, collaborative, and context specific, you're trying to figure out, not by guessing, but by actually observing in a systematic way, by interviewing, by getting the information from the people that are directly affected. And I don't mean this in a negative way, like they're being affected, but in the sense that they lack the skills. So you're trying to figure out exactly, what those skills are. What are you doing in relation to the skills that you need and you don't have? What is your context? So it's a little more than just having an informal conversation. You really need to prepare your instruments, your data collection instruments, your strategies, and then collect the data and then process that information. So that's exactly our first point here. It's collecting, and analyzing the data. Now, it's not just about putting it in a spreadsheet and then just kind of organizing it. Really, when I say you're analyzing information, means you're identifying where the gaps are, because that's exactly what you need to focus your ESP course on. So that's why it's so important to process that information, to find the gaps. Now, once you find those gaps, so what you need to do is you need to prepare your course and you align it from the design of the course. So those gaps, those are your decision points. So if you identify that students are having a difficult time writing emails because maybe their grammar is not that great, they do a lot of misspelling of words. Oh, okay, so that means that in your course assigned, you need to have sufficient exercises and revisions on exactly the importance and how to write emails within the context that they work in. Not in a business general situation, but in the context that they work in. Exactly. So you need to get a feel of what that context is, the work environment, the rules, the policies that they have, and how they connect people, in this case, emails, how they send emails, how they receive emails. So ultimately, you need to identify where they are now, where they want to be, And how does the training, your training course, your ESP course, how does that help the situation? To what degree? Because your course, remember, ESP courses are not extremely extensive. So you'll have a 20-hour, 30-hour, maybe 50-hour course. That's perhaps cutting it long. So you're not going to solve all of the issues. So you need to be clear what are the priorities, what's most important, and what are the collateral benefits that they're going to get. So let's say that by working grammar through writing, the collateral will be their conversation is going to improve. Maybe you're not going to work conversation specifically, but by working writing and grammar over here, this will, by consequence, be benefited. So you have to look at those priorities in that way, and that's where you're going to focus to get the maximum impact possible, because you simply cannot address each and every one of those issues. It's just going to be an enormously long course, and you will not have the time for that. So one of the things that you can look for as you're starting to you get into your needs analysis process is exactly getting into the documentation. But one of those things is speaking to your potential learners, speaking with other colleagues, speaking with the managers, and like I said, getting into the documentation. If they have procedures, if they have manuals, instructional manuals and such, get into those. Look at what they do, because all of the context is going to be in those documents, and then you complement with the interviews that you're going to do, and that's going to give you the broader picture. That's exactly what you want. And that is your needs analysis, like the whole of it in a sense. Okay, so that's going to give us sufficient context for the rest of the slides here. We're going to get into the instruments, what we can do, how we collect data, and how to process all of that data. But let's move on here as we progress in this video lecture. As you're preparing your needs analysis instrument and the collection of all of the data that you're going to gather with your instrument, there are some overarching questions that are important for you to make to yourself, not so much the other people. And here I have a list of these questions here on the slide. The first one thing to ask yourself is, why is the analysis being done? It's important. It might be an obvious question, but it is important to make it, for you to articulate the words that explain or give an answer to this question. Like, why am I doing this? Oh, okay, because I'm doing an ESP course and I need to get and understand this and that, and these are the people and all of that. So you need to explain it to yourself. That's important for you to do. Another one is, whose needs are being analyzed? Okay, because maybe they're calling on you to create a course, and you kind of talk broadly usually in those interviews, but you need to be specific. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, who am I speaking with? Who are going to be my students? What are their ages? What do they do? What are their levels? I need to know everything I can about those people, because this is an ESP course. This is not an EGP course, a general English course. This is specific. So I need to be specific in the information that I get, so that I can make better choices. I can prepare a better course. So you need to know who those people are. What skills and language are critical? This is going to be something that you're going to uncover through the process of your needs analysis, but it is an overarching question that you have to constantly have in your brain. What skills and languages are critical? What am I looking for? Or not so much what am I looking for, but what's emerging from the information? Is the lack of pronunciation, clarity, maybe their accent is far too heavy, maybe they're listening, I don't know. It could be several things, different skills or different sub-skills or combination of those. So what is emerging? What are those skills and languages that are critical to what they're doing, what they need to do, and it's just not happening right now? And that's why you need to intervene with your course. So very important. with regards to content that you're going to develop. Where and under what conditions will language be used? So, yes, we use language to communicate in a general sense, but the ways and the forms and the situations vary, and that will ultimately change the way people communicate. It's one thing to write an email, it's another thing to write the same message through a chat system like WhatsApp, or maybe they have something like Slack or any other uh, instant messaging system versus the same message in an email. Protocols are different. It's one thing to write an informal letter, it's another thing to write a company memo. Two different things, even though the message might be the same. So the structures are going to be the same. The intention is going to be different a little bit. The tone is going to be different. So again, the way that people communicate is going to affect the message. So that's why it's really important for you to really have clear where and under what conditions language is used so that you know how to address it, what structures to use, and what to practice with your students. And lastly, who are the stakeholders? The obvious answer will be your students because they're directly the stakeholders. They're the people that are most interested, apparently. However, behind that, there's other stakeholders that are surely not in your classroom, but have a high investment in what you're doing and what you're achieving with those students. To begin with, very potentially a manager or somebody in charge, a coordinator, a director of some kind. They're probably not going to be in your class, but they have direct interest in that your students get the language skills that they need because they need to report to that person through statistics like monthly deliveries and reports and such, so that they can communicate successfully in English will maybe in some way increase the reports, the statistics for the company in some way. So it's really important to know who is your stakeholder, not just your student, somebody else. Maybe there's other people around that are not such a direct stakeholder, maybe in an indirect. And obviously the client would be also an indirect stakeholder. Like, who are the clients? What are their characteristics? Because if they're all North American, well, okay, that's fine. But what part of North America? Is it from the south, from the northeast, from the northwest? Is it in the middle of the US? Are they from another country? Maybe it is English spoken, but are they from England? Are they from Australia? Those things will impact the content that you need to prepare for your course, because the regions are going to shift how the language is spoken. The accents are going to be different. The vocabulary is going to be different to some degree. So all of these things, like maybe they're indirect stakeholders like the clients, but the impact that it has on your content, it's high, really high impact. So some of the questions that you need to have clear and always present as you're preparing your instrument, as you're speaking with people, as you're interviewing, as you're observing the information that you have collected, so that you always get the best result possible from the information so that you can ultimately make the highest quality course content. Let's move on. Now, I believe now we have the data collection method. So let's take a look at those and see what options we have available. As with many things when collecting information, there are generally a variety of options that you have available in order to collect the information that you need. However, you do need to pay attention to the technique or the method uh, of how you're collecting information, because each one carries different requirements at the same time that each one carries different benefits. So you need to weigh which ones are best for your situation, uh, for your context of how you're collecting data, maybe the time that you have available for processing all of the information is limited. So that is going to lean you to do one sort of technique or method. If you have more time, maybe you're working with more people to process the information, maybe you can get a different sort of method going on, or maybe even a combination of methods, and that's going to give you a much richer picture. Okay, let's go through these very, very quickly. So the obvious one is the questionnaire, where you have a previously prepared a set of questions that you have designated that these questions are going to give you, or the answers to those questions are going to give you the context that you need to get the big picture of sorts. So I usually don't recommend that you do like these incredibly long questionnaires. So it is very important that you go through the process of analyzing and really carefully looking at each of those questions, how, not just the list of questions, but how the questions are formed, how you're structuring your questions, the word choices, because the words and how you're presenting the question is going to give you one sort of answer. If you change a few things, it's going to give you a completely different answer. So really important to be to really take the time to work on your questions. If you're going to do a 10 question questionnaire, 15 questions, uh, you don't have a lot of space for and time by each people answering. So you really have to be um, really, really on point with each one of your questions. The good thing here is it gives you a general depth. Like you get all of this, and then by doing several of those, you get a really good understanding of what's going on. Now, you can also do interviews. Now, these are interviews, these are more qualitative, to one. You also do have a questionnaire, very likely, but it's not a rigid questionnaire necessarily, although it can be the case. Uh, the benefit of not having a rigid questionnaire there is you have guidelines, like questions, broad questions, but then through the conversation, you allow to have follow up questions to kind of dig deep in some situations. The good thing here is going to give you this scale of the complete picture, totally rich. The counterpoint is it's going to give you so much information, and not all of that information is going to apparently align at the beginning. You have to really work the information, the data, to categorize it, to filter it, to sort it, so that it really makes sense for you. So there's going to be a lot of follow up work on your end, but you're going to get if you can do that, you're going to get some really interesting insights out of that. Another one is observations. Now, with observations, you will generally also have some sort of format uh, that you're going to be following up, where you're going to fill in some blanks, like maybe some boxes. You have like guides, like statement guides that are they doing this? Are they doing that? Yes, and why? And why is it? And why is it not? Maybe you have some questions, but you're not really talking with people. You're just observing. So that means that maybe in the workplace, you go one day and you just hang out and you observe. That's it. You don't intervene, you don't talk to people, you just observe. Now, there's a really great benefit to this because in the questionnaire, you don't really see people. I mean, you can email it, you can send them a link, and they answer an online questionnaire, and that's fine. But you don't really see the people. And remember, in your course, you're going to work with people, the people that you didn't see when they filled in the questionnaire. So you assume that they're telling the truth, but it's only usually a partial truth. So the rest you're going to discover while you're in the course. So that's a thing to consider. Now, the interviews will give you that one to one. That's so important. So by the time you get to the course, it's the people you talked with. So that's really great because now you know who they are, and you know uh, not just but by the notes that you took, but by having that one to one experience, you know who those people are and who you can work with and who's going to require more of your attention. So that's really great. But at the same time, you're so focused on collecting all of the data, making the interview, doing a good impression. It's so many things going on. You may, oversee a few things. Some things may skip, may be out of your attention span. So you might be missing out on some fine details. Observation, though, because you're not involved in all of that thing, because you're not so distant, I mean, you're there, you're just observing, you actually have the time to really analyze while you're taking the notes. So it's not you're taking the raw data, you're taking notes on the visual analysis that you're doing on the spot. So there's some benefits there as well. And you also see the people that you're going to be working with in your course. So again, different methods, different benefits, and different requirements and setbacks. Something to really have in mind when you're preparing all of this in the real world, of course. Another one is language samples. That means that you dive into the documentation. Mainly, you ask for manuals, instructions, possible emails that may be shared with you, where they're actually using the language so that you can identify how they're using it as a to have two samples. The one is what is the optimal example? Like this is how we want to use the language. So give me examples of those. The more examples you can give me of that, the better. And also how you are now really using the language, so you can see that difference. Because if they just share with you the optimal performance of how to use language, okay, that's fine. Okay, I see where you want to go, but I don't know where you are. So what do we need to do? What's the trajectory? I don't know. That's why I need to do the course to do that, to get that trajectory. So you need to give me those 2 points, where you want to get and where you are now, so that I can show you the path to get to there. So you need those two samples. And that's through all of the documentation, all of the digital documents, notes, everything, and everything that they can provide to you relevant to your course content, of course. Then that's great. That's really it. It's your analysis. It's your um, while the interviews and questionnaires may be more in the field, like you're speaking with people, you're interviewing. This is really just office work. It's just you opening up your computer, working with the documents, and from there getting all of the information that you need. The last one, and this you could say it's a much newer one because of the technological advancements that we've had. And this is the AI simulations. This is wonderful because you can get a little bit of everything else, like the questionnaire, the interviews, the observations, the language samples, all into one. It's kind of neat. But here, what you need to do a proper AI simulation is you need to do at least two things. One is you need to gather and have the stakeholders provide to you as much samples. And I'm talking procedures, manuals, books, emails, meeting notes, minutes, all of the documentation where they are using the language, how they're using the language, and also where samples of where they want the language, what sort of language they want to use. Again, the same idea with language samples, where they want to be and where they are. Give you all of that information. And then what you need also is the profiles and the job descriptions of the people working in the company. So you need the job descriptions and the characteristics and their qualifications and their strengths and weaknesses of the managers, of the people from the bottom to the top, or at least everybody that's going to be present in your course. And then also some people that they contact with, like if it's clients, like maybe it's sensitive information that they don't want to provide names, but okay, give me the characteristics. Like what are the characteristics of your providers that you speak with that you need to use language with? What are the characteristics of the clients that you speak with that you need your people to use the language with? Give me everything. So they need to give you everything. And what you do is you feed all of that information into the AI, whatever large language model that you like to use. And that's the first part. The second part that you need to do is you need to get into the prompting. You need to get into prompting, get all the instructions going, prepare your artificial intelligence to work with that information in the way that you want it to work. And then once you have set those two up, then you start chatting. And it's going to be a super focused AI bot that you've generated that's going to give you everything that you need, and not just the samples in a very controlled way, but also the information already analyzed, because you can ask for the analysis and the insights to the AI. Okay, so these are some of the methods that you're going to use, that you can use, not you're going to use in the course, but that you can use in the real world. Again, depending on the time, you can use one or you can use the other, although the best idea is to use at least two. Like if you're going to do a questionnaire, follow up with some samples. If you're going to do interviews, maybe a questionnaire. If you're going to do observations, how about a questionnaire as well? Like do your observations for the day and then wrap it up with a questionnaire to kind of get the two sides. Like this is what I observed, but this is what they experience. So sometimes there can be differences. Again, that'll give you the bigger picture of everything. Okay, so that's it for data collection. Let's move on here to the next slide to further our exploration of the data analysis or the needs analysis process. So as one of the methods I was talking about using AI, this, of course, is one of the new benefits that we have when doing needs analysis, because you can feed in all of the information, like I was saying, like usually the language samples, all from the documentation, emails, meeting notes, minutes, and such, and feed it into the AI, and then have it not just work the information for you, but also help you in figuring out what the insights are, what new learnings you can get, and from there start making your decisions as to what sort of information you need to include in your course content, what language skills, what techniques, what strategies, what samples you're going to use, and then start organizing that into your syllabus. Great. Now, to do that, well, of course, yes, you need to get a bigger set of information data sets. First, you need your job descriptions. So your job descriptions are for everybody that's not just in your course, but everybody that's around, specifically the people that they interact with. So if let's say you have a salesperson and your salesperson interacts with, let's say, the manager, and that communication needs to be in English. They interact with a client, so that communication needs to be in English. They interact with some kind of provider, that also needs to be in English. So for each one of those, you need a description, either a job description or a broad description. Like if you would provide a template for that, like a structure or format sheet, that would be even better, because it's the information that you require in a consistent way, and you're not depending on whatever they give you. You instead say, okay, please fill out this form, and it's the form that with the information that you need for the client, for the provider, for the HR, for the salesperson, and that way you get information in the way that you need it. And that's the one thing. So you get for everybody that is involved in the circle, and you get all of that information into the AI. The other point is to use the prompts. To nowadays, it's not just about working in the chat with a large language model, but it's the instructions that you set in the background. Like how is this AI going to interact with you and with the information, and how is it going to analyze and process information? So you can prompt it at a bigger level there by getting into usually configurations of some kind and getting into the instructions for the AI in the big picture. And that's where you set up the prompts. You get all of the information, and then you get into the chat working with your information. Now, there's different ways that different AIs will have different configuration formats. It really depends on the AI that you're going to use. Figure out all of those nuances, where you're going to upload the documents, where you're going to configure the AI from a general picture, and then have you like work with the AI at a chat level to now help you work with the information, not to do the work for you, but to help you discover the insights. And you're going to lead the conversation, and the AI is going to respond in suit. So it's really important that you always have clear, go back to those questions, the key questions that I explained before, and always have a clear mindset, like what do you want to get out of this information? The AI is not going to tell you. You have to tell the AI what information you want from the data that you have already uploaded to there. Now, for the task at hand, it's not just to get like have, let's say, the salesperson and get the information for the salesperson. What you really want to do is get a variety. So five, here I have five interactions. So maybe from the HR office, from the manager, from the learner himself, maybe from a client. It really is that you set up those chats to rotate the roles so that you have all of those descriptions there, and then they can provide the answers as they're playing the role of those job positions. That way, you can have a much better simulation for our tasks and our learning process within this course. So, once again, to get the job descriptions for each of the roles that are going to be relevant to your course, to your ESP course design. The It could be the manager, it can be the salesperson, it can be the client, it can be the provider, whoever it is, based on the exercise that you're doing. That's one thing, getting all of that information. Number two, getting the prompts at a system level, not the chat level, but the system level for the AI. You have to get into configuration, find the instructions for the AI, and that's where you write, okay, this is how I want you to interact with this information. And also figure out where you're going to upload those documents. Are you going to upload them directly in the chat window? Do you have another space? Like if you're using a project section, then you have project files, so you can upload it there. So you have to figure out those things within the configuration of your AI. And once you have everything set up, the documents, the information, the prompt, then you can start working with the chat right there. It's to start getting, okay, so hi, you're the HR manager or the HR officer. Okay, so I have a few questions. So now you're the teacher, and then the AI now is the officer, let's say, and now you have a conversation. Okay, so I want to figure out these things for the English levels that you have in your office. Okay, great. Here we go. Question number one, and then you start writing your questions that you previously wrote for your data collection instrument, your needs analysis instrument. Pretty much that's it. Ultimately, the benefit of this is you can set up the artificial intelligence to keep a record of everything that you're doing. So just say in the background, keep a record of everything, and ultimately, or at the end, I'm going to ask you for a downloadable spreadsheet of all of this interaction that we're going to have. Okay. Once you confirm that, you start having your conversation to get all of the information to do the simulation. And then at the end, okay, we're done. Please generate the spreadsheet. It'll give you the spreadsheet for you to download, and there you have your data collection set. And after that, you can process the information in other ways to generate graphics and such once you get it into a spreadsheet. So ultimately, that's in a broad sense the way that you can work with the AI to create a simulation of interacting with people. Uh, there might be a bigger process here, but for the time that we have, this will be enough. This will give you some good insights as to what you can do, not just with AI, but with the information, how you can process it, how you can prepare it, and then how you can observe it to start making decisions as you're preparing your ESP courses, and also any sort of language courses or course in general. There you go. Let's move on into our next slide. Some good questions or good practices when collecting data. Um, this is really important to have that mindset of the process of when you're doing the data collection. Um, it's not just about you're in, you do the thing, you're out, but it's how you're approaching it. Now, that's really important. To begin with, because you're there to learn, you're there to observe, to learn what's happening. You have to vary how you're interacting with people that you're interviewing or you're getting the answers from in some way. Either if you're doing a questionnaire, you're interviewing, or you're observing, it's always so important to just listen. Listen to what people have to say, because through what they have to say is the answers that you need to get to. So listen more than you talk. So important within the whole process. That's like a mindset you have to go into. You're not there to give answers at that moment, even though it might be quite apparent to you from a language standpoint. Like, you're the language expert, so I know what you need to do. But okay, that's not the time for you to provide those answers. Right there is the time for you to listen to what people are going through, what their strengths are, what their difficulties are, and then take note of that, record that. Also, while you're doing the questions, again, so important while you were preparing those questions beforehand to keep the questions clear and concise. Really working on structuring your questions using the best possible word selection and keeping it simple, concise, so it's not confusing. Mainly, the longer your question is, the more potentially is going to confuse other people, because they won't know what you're really asking, because maybe you have two or three topics within the same question. So it's better to break it up into several questions, shorter questions. Um, so again, clear and concise questions. Adopt an open question into a Likert scale. So the thing about open questions is you don't know what you're going to get, pretty much. One person is going to say one thing, another person is going to say something different. Some people are going to give you really short answers. Other people are going to give you extended answers. So you're going to get this broad diversity of answers, of information, and processing that, categorizing, cataloging, coding can be a nightmare. I mean, it's possible, but it's just going to take you a long time. So another way of approaching that is to do a Likert scale. So like a 1 to 5 thing, okay, where 1 is the worst, and 5 is the best. Rate it. And then you have like your statements or situations, and you have them rate each one of those. That'll give you more or less the same insights, and in a more controlled manner that ultimately you can process, you can work with in a much faster way than to get those open questions. Don't get me wrong, sometimes we do need those open questions, but when you do, place them strategically in certain places within your questionnaire, because you really need that open question to be there, not just because it's like, oh, it's just an open question because I just want to see what people do. No, it's like, this is an open question in this position because of this and this and this. Like, you have a logic that's working there for you to place that there. Okay, be respectful and professional, because you're learning about people's difficulties. So it's really important that you are sensible in what people are telling you. Like, they're telling you what they're having a difficult time with, and potentially what is putting their job in danger. Like, I can't write emails. So, and then 5 other colleagues can, and they're going to do it, but they're going to get my clients if I don't learn English. Whoops. Okay, so that's a problem. So that could be a difficult thing. Like, that's just a simple example, but maybe there's other situations that are a little more dire for people, or maybe they're missing job opportunities because they can't speak English, or they can't write English, or they don't process English in the way that they need to in their business, in their job. So again, it's really having that sensibility, being respectful of the answers that they're going to provide, understanding that there's some ethics behind this, that you're collecting sensitive data, personal data, and that you're not going to share it with anybody. It's for your internal workings only. So sometimes what we do is we do a release where you write the, let's say, the parameters, the guidelines, the ethical parameters that you're going to be working the data with. In one of those parameters, you say, I'm not going to share this information with anybody, only with people within the company for the purposes of creating an ESP course, strictly, like in some way like that. Because it's really important for the company, for the business, for the people involved. So be respectful and professional at all times and collect enough data. Sometimes a data point, let's say one person will give you one data point because it's that person's experience. But that's just part of the context if you're in a business that has, let's say, 20 people. So that's a one segment, that's a 1 in 20 of 20 different experiences, and you're just collecting one data point. So the more people you talk with, the richer the picture becomes, the more colorful and the more depth it gets. Um, so again, it may not be possible for you to interview exactly everybody, but as many people as possible. If not everybody, then look at, let's say, this example of the 20 people and look at this from a strategic standpoint. Who are in those pivot points? Maybe you don't need to interview everybody. Maybe you just need to interview people that are in key positions who can oversee and really understand everything that happens under their job description, like maybe a department coordinator. So maybe you don't need to interview everyone. Maybe just interview the coordinator and one person who is in that coordinator's team. That's it. Instead of interviewing everybody, that'll give you the sufficient picture. You don't want to get the complete 100% picture, but you want to get a sufficient enough clearer picture to know and what the situation is, and then have you get the best decision making process available with that information that you have. Right. So these are some general good practices to have as you're doing your needs analysis process. Okay, so in this one and in the following slides, we're going to look at working with the information. And to begin with, it's organizing. So you've collected all of the information. You had your instrument, you did the interviews, or you did the questionnaires, or the language samples, or work with AI, whatever method, technique, or combination of you use. Ultimately, you're going to get a big pile of information, all of the data. Either if you collected it digitally in forms or sheets, and it's all written down, you have it in some way, shape, or form. Great. So, what's next? Well, the next step is to put all of that into a spreadsheet. And your spreadsheet is going to be great because it's going to give you that structure just on its own with the rows and the columns to start ordering information and to start organizing, grouping it. Because that's really the way that you're going to see the patterns. That's what you want to put it into some kind of spreadsheet. You want to find the patterns. For example, let's say that within your questionnaire, you have a question, you have a closed question where you ask, like, is email writing or is writing emails to providers important in your business or in your job description? And you have a yes and no answer. So on its own, it may not seem like a lot, like, oh, writing an email. But let's say that you did 10 interviews, and from those 10 interviews, 8 said yes to that question. And by grouping those answers, you go, oh, wait a minute, that's important. And you only saw that because you were able to group it in a spreadsheet. So that's the importance. That's the value of putting everything in a spreadsheet and then finding ways to group the information to get it to synthesize so that you can start seeing those patterns. Where are people saying yes? Where are people saying no? What keywords are highlighting more? Like let's say a word cloud. So maybe you go like, out of all of the key phrases that you identified through their interview, like maybe you go, well, I found 20 key phrases of different actions that they do throughout their job day or throughout the day in their jobs. But I found that speaking with customers on the phone, like talking on the phone, let's say that's your key phrase, that came up 30 times in conversations. Whereas the other ones, let's say reading a manual, that came up only 5 times. So, oh, wait a minute. Because you took, let's say you took 5 days to interview everybody, So it's spread out over 5 days. You don't really pick those things up. You only pick them up, you observe them when you collect everything in a spreadsheet, and then you start grouping things in one way and another way and in another way. And then you go, oh, wait a minute. I just realized people said, like speaking on the phone, so many times versus these other key phrases. Oh, okay. So that's important. That's how you start processing your information and you start getting those insights like what is really important to this business for who I am preparing this ESP course for. So one of the things is, well, yes, one way of organizing, a common way, let's say, is all of the responses you're going to have for one person is all of the row, but the columns are the questions for your questionnaire. So question and person. So they kind of collide in that way. That's just one basic. There can be other ways of organizing, but I usually find that to be the best. Um, Really important to enter the responses consistently. One thing that I find not everybody pays attention to, but it's so important to the process that your information is consistent in the way it is typed in. So, for example, date formats. Like some people will write day, month, year. Other people will write month, year, day. Some people will write it short form, where it's only numbers. Other people will write longer form, where it's numbers and words. Other people will use comma. Other people don't use comma. It's crazy. But in this sort of process analyses that you need to do, all of the data has to be in the same format. So you need to decide beforehand, as you're preparing your instrument, how am I going to receive data? Date formats. What date format am I going to use? What if I'm going to use time formats? What time format am I going to use? Is it going to be 24 hours or is it going to be 12 hours? You have to make that choice. It's a simple choice, but it's such a profound choice to make when you're processing information because it's going to facilitate everything. If you have some time formats in 24 hours, other ones in 12 hours, sometimes they use only the 12 a.m. p.m. Other times they use 12 semicolon dot 00. It's crazy again because when you start grouping information, it's not going to coincide. So you're not going to get reliable results. It's going to be all over the place. All of your information has to be formatted in the same way. So date format in the same column, time format. If you're gathering open questions, it's very likely you're going to have to identify key phrases and break those apart, each key phrase into its own column. So in my example of talking on the phone, that would be one column. On my example of is email important, that's another column. Because that way you can mark how many, who said what, and then by doing that, you can now group it. Grouping is key because that's how you're going to get patterns and the number of times something was repeated, said, or came up in conversation. So organizing your data, um, being sanitary is I think another phrase. So for text, some people write all caps, some people write all in small caps, other people interchange. Wait a minute, you need to make up your mind. So are you going to take all caps? Are you take small caps? Are you going to switch? Are you going to have the first letter capital and then the rest small caps? So you need to decide these are so small things, but they're so important. Names. If you're going to take names, are you going to have the full name in one cell? Are you going to break it up? Last name, first name, don't mix it up. So all of these things, you need to sanitize your information in that way. So it's clear, consistent in its formatting, and that is going to facilitate everything when you start working with the spreadsheet. Highlighting the recurring words, I was saying about doing the columns, that would be the best way. You don't want to have like in a cell, like this very long answer. You have to break it up. And ultimately, that's one way of highlighting. And then when you have everything in your spreadsheet, that's when you start sorting, you start filtering the information. so that you can start looking for those patterns. It's just right there. It's just to be picked. So, but you need to process your data so it's formatted, so it's sanitized, so it's all consistently formatted. And then the spreadsheet is going to be the most powerful tool that you can have at that point. Um, you don't need to be an expert at Excel or using spreadsheets. Nowadays, as we're getting more AI into these systems, you can have like the AI work with you to help you prepare the information, group it, and then have you just click through a few filters and then start seeing those patterns. That's one way of doing it. But ultimately, if you don't have access to using AI with any of these spreadsheet systems, I mean, just using the basics, getting your rows, getting your columns, separating all of those long answers into sections, and then finding recording for each person, whoever said what in key phrases. Uh, Color coding would be another one also. And pretty much just find where to open up the filters for the columns. And that's it. That's pretty much what you need in a very basic way, because you don't need to be an expert at spreadsheets. Just type in the information, sanitize it, activate the filters for all of the columns, and then just once you have all the information there, start filtering your columns. Combine the filters. Like, let's say everybody that works in the morning shift, what did they say with regard to emails? And then filter. And then you have two filters. Oh, okay. So in the morning, this is what they believe. In the afternoon, this is what they believe. Oh, okay. This is what happens before lunch. This is what happens after lunch. So you need to activate and open and shut multiple filters to see these variations throughout the day. And then you get the full picture. That is going to be incredible insight for you as a course designer, because it'll really help you to pinpoint these situations, who said what and to what experience they're having and to where they need to be and to what strengths and to what weaknesses that they have. And that's kind of the processing, the analyzing of the information with the spreadsheet. Great. Let's move on here to another slide here as we continue to explore this process of using spreadsheets and processing the information that you've gathered. As you continue processing your information in your spreadsheets, working with the patterns, filtering, um, I was talking about this in the previous slide. To group, to separate, to identify those key phrases, to color code, to format, to sanitize your information, ultimately getting it so it's presentable within the confines of the spreadsheets, so you can take full advantage of the spreadsheet functionality to your benefit. So yes, I was already talking a little bit about that, about the analysis process, but let's just touch on that here a little more. So once again, looking for patterns. Once you have everything in your spreadsheet, it's formatted, it's organized, it's sanitized, it's spread out as it needs to be spread out. Great. Start filtering, look for those patterns. Look for patterns within single questions, within single columns, but more importantly, look for patterns as you're combining filters for each of the questions with other questions, with names of people, or if you don't have the names, maybe you assigned a random number or a random name, job description number. So everybody at the same job description level, what did they say for this question? Bam, you have those right there, and you get those percentages of how so many people said yes to this question, so many people said no. Okay, so that's where you start to see the patterns. At a higher job position level, what did they say in regards to the same question? Okay, so you start getting some insights as to what sort of experiences and requirements people are having with one specific thing. And then you start looking at it from different angles. Okay, so what if I get, okay, for these people at this job level description or job level with this question, okay, great, it was about emails. But when I asked about language levels, what did they say? Okay, so you include that also there. Okay, they said they it's important for them, but for language level, they feel they are at this level. Oh, interesting. Okay, so what does that mean for me when I'm preparing the ESP course? So notice what I'm doing there. I'm looking at the information first with an approach of curiosity. It's like, what am I going to find here? It's not like, oh, I need to work with the information. It's like, I want to discover something. This is interesting. This is engaging for me. It's also what I do. It's what I've studied for. It's what I do. It's what I work in. And more importantly, you're making questions. You're not just clicking away at the column filters just to see what happens. No, you're actually, let's say you're making questions to the spreadsheet. Okay, spreadsheet, I need to answer this question. And this is something that you're going to like think before. Like, I already spoke with the general manager. This is what they told me. This is what they need. This is where they are. Okay, so let's say for the all of the data that's in your spreadsheet, okay, why are they at the place that they are with regards to the language level? So, okay, so to answer that question, what do I need to observe in the data? So you start clicking to find the answer to that. So again, it's about making questions to the information. And then through those filters, through the grouping, through the color coding, you start to discover it. It starts to emerge, but you need to have your question clear and what you're looking for. So also, so important, look for patterns, look for the recurring needs, what's coming up over and over again, what is something that's being said for so many people and for the less. Sometimes you have to pay attention to what a lot of people are saying. Other times you need to pay attention to what the lower number of people are saying. So maybe 8 people out of 10 said yes to this, but only 2 people said no. Oh, for this question, it's really important for those 2 people that said no. That's really the important part right here. So you need to know how to flip on from the positive to the negative, to the needs, to the requirements, to where they need to be and where they are. So you need to understand all of that scenario, make those questions, and start finding those patterns. Compare similarities and differences between the roles. I was talking about this just now. Identify critical language, events, meetings, calls, reports. This, you should have had a prior interview at the beginning of all of this process with some kind of manager, director, principal, somebody in charge, maybe middle management or higher, that is contracting you to do the course. So in that initial interview, and hopefully you got a hold of material and the general activities that they go about in the context, and that's where this comes in: the meetings, the calls, the reports, the phone calls, the emails, all of the different what we call the genres that we work the information in. So the different genres will yield different structures, different formats, different tones of how we speak and how we communicate, how we receive information, and how we produce information within the genre. So that's something else for you to look in your data analysis as you're filtering your spreadsheet. Look at those. Like maybe you have questions regarding 1 or 2 questions regarding meetings. Okay, so they said that for emails, this is it. Okay, but what about for the meetings? So they said, I remember that when I had my initial interview with the manager, said that people are not taking notes during meetings, that meetings are so important. Okay, so why are people not taking meeting notes? Interesting. So is that available in my information, in my data set? Okay, let's see. So now I make the question mentally. Why are people not taking notes during meetings? Interesting. Okay, so let's see. So out of all of these people, so what's involved in taking notes? Okay, so listening, writing, and maybe multitasking. Oh, do I have questions for those? Well, yes, I do. I don't have for multitasking, but I do have for language level and I do have for writing. okay, what are people saying for writing? So I group everybody and then I find the writing question. Oh, their levels are rather low. And do I have something for vocabulary? Is there vocabulary information here? Okay, you find something kind of relevant, maybe not precise, but kind of relates to that. Oh, it's also they don't have a lot of vocabulary. Interesting. So they don't have a good level of writing and they don't have a lot of vocabulary. Ha, I found the answer why they're not taking meeting notes. Because they can't. They don't know how to do it in the language. So now I know what I need to dedicate a full unit to: taking meeting notes, writing, and expanding vocabulary for the job place, for the workplace. That's how you find information. That's how you find the answers in your spreadsheets. You have to constantly be making those questions to your data set to identify those critical language events: meetings, calls, reports, and so on and so forth. Separating training versus non-training issues. Now, when you have your open questions, people are going to give you these broad answers. A lot of people will give you some very succinct questions, answers. Other people are just going to go around the bush and they're going to give you the answers, but then they're going to give a lot of personal insights and their experiences and so on and so forth. And then if you're audio recording that, you're going to get these very long-winded responses. So it's very important for you to go through that and isolate. Okay, wait a minute. So here that person is giving me an anecdote, but is this a job related anecdote or is this a personal related anecdote because something else kind of went off on some kind of tangent there? So you need to identify what's relevant and what's not from your data set. Really important stuff because that's going to facilitate your work when you're preparing your spreadsheet information, when you're sanitizing and formatting everything. So separate it. And also, so it doesn't, forgot my word here, so it doesn't contaminate. That could be a good word. So it doesn't contaminate your data set because your data set has to be completely focused on the environment that these people are working with, where they need to go and where they are. So it has to be super focused so that when you're making your questions and you're filtering and finding those patterns, it's really giving you reliable answers. If you include stuff, information, answers that are not relevant, it's going to contaminate the answers and it's going to start leaning certain ways that are not relevant to the job descriptions and the situations, and that's going to ultimately impact the quality of your ESP course. And in turn, that could potentially mean that, hey, wait a minute, why are you practicing this in your English course when we'd never do that? Like, but it was in my answers. Oh, wait a minute. It's because you didn't separate the training versus the non-training. So important. Prioritizing base and frequency and importance. Again, I was already commenting on this before. The frequency of how many things something comes up, or maybe the frequency of how many times something doesn't come up. That can also be important. It really depends on what you're looking for, what your question is as you're filtering and finding those patterns. What's priority? Maybe you go, oh, this is coming up a lot of times, but it's not important. It's not important for them in this current situation. So, okay, that was interesting, but it's not important, so I'm not going to pay attention to it. You have to continually look at these things because it's going to affect your course, what you're going to include and what you're going to exclude from your ESP course. So these are just some general guidelines. For the most part, everything applies, but again, it has to, because we're talking about an ESP course, English for specific purposes, it really depends on your context, what you're looking for, who you're talking with, what information you're gathering, how you're gathering that information, what sort of instruments you're gathering, what you're questioning what you're making, what sort of questions you're making to your spreadsheet, to your data, so that you can get those replies through the filtering and the sorting. So it's going to vary at different times as you're looking through all of this information. But in a general sense, these are some of the guidelines and the principles that you need to implement as you're doing this entire process. Okay, Let's go to the next slide as we go from theory to practice. Great. So you've gone through the process of collecting your data, gathering it, putting it into a spreadsheet, formatting, uh, uh, preparing all of the data as it needs to be prepared within the spreadsheet, activating those filters, color coding, doing everything you need to do with the process, and then start making those questions. And you start filtering and you start finding those patterns. You start to contrast against priorities. You start looking at frequencies. So you have all of that there. And then you start learning a lot, not just about what they said, what your contractor, the person that's contracting you, what he or she said, like this is what we want, but more importantly, through the answers that you collected, you find out what they need in relation to what they want. That is going to place you in a much better position of developing an ESP course. But it doesn't stop there, because it's not just about collecting all of the data, putting it into a spreadsheet, and then finding those patterns and then learning. I mean, that's a key part. Of course, it is. It's a key part. It's a key stage in the process. But then something else has to come out of it. You have to articulate it. Everything, all of those insights that you gathered, that you achieved through this process of working with the information in your spreadsheet, well, ultimately, you have to bring it down to reality in the ways of, these are the principles that I need to follow as I'm doing my course design, my ESP course design. And that's here what this slide is about. So one idea, one recommendation here is for you to write a short summary of your findings. This can be in the format that you decide. If you want to do paragraph formats, if you want to do listed like bullets or numbers, that's fine. But ultimately, it has to have enough information that it explains and justifies why you're making the choices that you're making. Because now you're going to have your guide. That's it. Everything you learned from your analysis of the information is placed right there in that document. Easy to read, easy to follow. And when you're doing your course design, it's just right there. You don't need to go back into the data unless you want to figure out a few other things, which might be more niche, much more specific. But ultimately, that's kind of your guideline right there. So you want to generate that summary in some way. And as you're doing that, you want to link those needs to possible solutions. Remember, at the beginning of all of this, you had an interview, you had somebody tell you, hey, we need an ESP course. Great, you go, you have an interview. What do you need? Where do you want to get? And where are you? Okay, so by that contrast, you find out what those needs are, at least what they said they need. Now that you have actual answers and you have those insights, now you have to link everything to that opening interview and those extraction of needs that you did at that time. Okay, this over here is what you told me that you need. This is what I found that you need. Some things match, other things you need, you didn't know that you need, but now I know that you need them. You kind of get into that kind of wordplay. So you have to link everything. Everything has to be connected to actual and real necessities that they have. And that way, when you do your syllabus, it's actually about things that they really need because it's based on the data. It's based on the information that you gathered and you worked and you obtained those insights from. Provide clear teaching focus area. That would be your syllabus, your content program. That's where you kind of work those language levels, those language skills, and the vocabulary and the grammar to the degree and to the extent that is necessary for the learning process, and nothing more, nothing less. So you don't want to get into these grammar tangents. That's not the purpose. It's really to target whatever is necessary for those language scenarios that they need to work in, to satisfy whatever necessity that they have, and that's it. So it's really not about the grammar. I can't emphasize this enough. ESPs are not grammar courses. They are language development courses to be proficient and competent in the language. So you have to maybe at some points touch a little bit on the grammar just to kind of drive the point home. But really it's about practicing and role playing and developing the skills to do those tasks. Keep recommendations realistic and evidence based. Once again, as I've been saying along this slide and throughout these lecture, keep it real. That's ultimately it. So it's not really about, I started this with, it's not really about your gut feeling. Like maybe you had the opening interview and you go, oh, okay, well, based on what you're telling me, I kind of feel what you need already. I kind of know. I just kind of feel it. That's not enough. You have to go through this process. You have to gather the information. You have to do your instrument. Uh, really pay attention to the questions that you're doing there. Get the information, put it into a spreadsheet, sanitize it, format it, filter it, patterns, priorities, do your summary, linking everything, because it has to be based on reality, evidence based. Oh, I place this topic here in unit 2 because from the insights from the data that I collected, I saw these patterns based on these priorities, and that's why it's here. Because in the order of things, it needs to be there. So it's not just because, oh, it feels right. Oh, because I saw 5 EGP courses, textbook courses or student book courses, and they always put it there. So I just kind of followed the pattern. That is not enough for an ESP course. It really has to be context specific, real to the job description situation, the workplace, or if I focus here on the occupational aspect. But remember, this also applies to academics. So if you're talking about that your students are going to be, let's say, a group of teachers that work at a university that they're learning English, well, maybe they're researchers. Okay, so whatever situation that they use the language for in their research process, that's what you need to focus in, and not just something that it was kind of in an EGB student book course. So that's kind of what you need to do, and this kind of closes the circle from the starting point of this video lecture to here. So as we conclude here, we're just going to take a look at some pitfalls and wrap it up for this video lecture. Okay, and before we wrap everything up here, let's just look at some common pitfalls. Now, the tricky thing about this is I've mentioned some of these throughout this lecture, but I think it's really important to put them all together. Again, looking for those patterns, grouping everything, and then it kind of makes a lot more sense instead of having it spread out. So the first one here, collecting too little data. So you have too few data points. I was mentioning this before, like if you have 20 interviews that you've done, so and you interview just one person, that's 1 in 20 of the total picture that you can get from just that one interview. So you want to get sufficient pictures or data sets or data points, more precisely, to get a much clearer picture of what the situation is so that you can extract the necessities. Again, I was also commenting on you don't perhaps need to interview all 20. Maybe some people in key places, in key positions, based on what you're looking for. It will depend. Maybe based on what you're looking for, you do need to interview everybody. Maybe you need to interview people in certain positions in relation to others. So it really depends on the situation, but it's an analysis that you need to do at the point. More importantly, you want to be very careful that you interview everybody that you need to interview so that you get the sufficient data points within your spreadsheet. What you don't want to do is go through the interview process and then put everything together and then find out, uh-oh, I still need to interview 5 more people. Ew, you have to go back now. You have to make phone calls, send emails, schedule new dates. People are busy. It can be a problem, and especially if you have a deadline for when you need to start your ESP course. This is just going to be a huge setback, or it could potentially be. So really important to identify how many people you need to interview, how many data points you need to have, and then actually execute over that so that when you're processing your data, you have the information that you need to get everything that is going to come out of that. Vague or overlapping questions. I've mentioned this before about being precise and concise with your questions. If you have too long questions, your questions just have clauses and clauses and clauses, one over the other, it's just going to, the percentage or the possibility of confusing other people, people that you're getting answers from, is going to just increase. So one option there is to break that question up into several questions or to simplify it in some way, especially if you have two or three topics that you're touching on that question, then break it up. If it's two topics, that's two questions. If it's three topics, then that's three questions. Potentially four, depends on the question, depends on what you're trying to get at, but simple, easy to understand questions, because that's going to elevate the percentage of you getting the answer that you're looking for. Truthful, direct, real, juicy answers that are going to give you the best results when you're working with the information. So be careful about those vague, overlapping questions. Just not your friends when doing your needs analysis. Not at all. Ignoring non training causes. I was mentioning this before about the training data and the non training data. Um, Again, people are going to give you all sorts of answers. So you need to cut through all of that, and you need to find the information that's real and relevant to what you're trying to achieve. If you allow, or if you don't pay attention to anecdotal information that is perhaps not relevant to the job or the workplace, then it's going to contaminate, I was saying before. It's going to contaminate your data, and the results that you're going to get, they're going to start leaning different ways. And then that's going to heavily impact your course design and your course content and the experience potentially, and perhaps not satisfy the people that are hiring you to do that ESP course. So really important for you to identify what is relevant, what is not relevant. Overlapping the spreadsheet, having too much information on your spreadsheet. Uh, One thing you need to do again is finding those answers, making those questions within your spreadsheet. So, sorry, I said overlapping, but I meant overloading is your spreadsheet. I misread there. So, one thing you want to do again, this kind of relates to the previous one. If you put all of this information where it's non-training data, it's training data, it's just going to get this enormous spreadsheet. And when you're doing your questions, trying to filter, it's just going to be crazy. Or I was also mentioning about not sanitizing information. If you have your dates and they're all different formats, you have your times, they're different formats. The answers, even the yes and no answers, if it's not a checkbox, if some people said yes, other people said yeah, other people said yep, other people said something else, which is an affirmative. It could have many options, perhaps. It's just going to be crazy. And those sort of things, they just kind of overload everything, and it's just going to be impossible for you to get good and reliable answers. So it's something to pay attention. If you analyze who you're going to interview, really understand the cosmos of information, of people that are involved, all the information that you need, the questions that you're going to do, you avoid doing those overlapping and vague questions, you focus on the training data, then it's very likely that your data spreadsheet is going to be fine. But if you misstep on anything else, then there is a potential possibility that you're just going to get so much data in your spreadsheet that it's just going to be impossible. It's going to be slow. It's going to be difficult to find the patterns. Um, that means you're going to have to rework everything. It's just more time and energy that you're going to invest. So it could be very problematic because everything you're going to decide after the fact depends on you working with the data. So it's so important that you have your data in the best possible conditions. So it just makes the job smoother and run better for everybody, and more importantly for you as a course designer. And then finally, jumping to solutions without evidence. Remember, everything is evidence-based, so you need to justify everything. If you're setting up a syllabus, your course design, and then in your course design you have your syllabus. You have a sequence of units, and within each topical unit, you have a list of skills with topics and language skills. So they're not just randomly placed there. They should be decisions, careful decisions that you're making based on what you found through your data, through your data analysis process. That's really it. So it has to be evidence based, and you need to be able to justify all of that. That's why I was mentioning before, write up a summary, because your summary, either if you do it in paragraph, bullet points, list, number points, um, those are your guidelines and justifications of why you're doing everything that you're doing when you're doing your course development and your syllabus. Uh, so important. So notice how each part of the stage, there's a reason for it to be there. It's not just a random thing. One thing takes you to the next and helps you to justify and keep everything evidence based. So next and next and next. That's really, again, and something that has been mentioned at the beginning of the course. It's specific, it's context based. Unlike an EGP course where you can have a publisher, a student book from a given publisher, you use it with a group of students and it kind of works because it's just general English. It's English for everyday things, for going online, for listening to music, for watching a movie, going shopping, uh, having a casual conversation with friends or family. It's fine. It's just general English for everyday life. But here, there's other rules, there's other guidelines. So it's so important that for occupational purposes, for academic purposes, you really focus on the evidence, and based on the evidence, you create your ESP course. So important that all of those links are strong. Great, there we go. So some pitfalls to avoid as you're going through all of this. Again, it's not something that you consciously need to be paying attention to, as long as you're following these stages and you're paying attention and being careful with how you're handling your instruments, how you're handling the information, how you're handling the process as you're analyzing, then all of these kind of go off the wayside, and that's fine. But if at some point you start finding difficulties, like, oh, the information is not giving me good answers, I'm having difficulties with this, I'm having problems with that, then wait a minute. So what are some of the pitfalls that maybe I inadvertently did in my process? And okay, once you identify that, oh, wait a minute, some of my questions were vague. Ew, that's a problem. So okay, what am I going to do to solve it? It's important to identify what it was so that you know how to provide a solution for that. Great. So let's wrap this up here as we go into our concluding slide. So here we are at the end of this lecture, and the main purpose of all of this has been to give you this roadmap. That's it. Uh, I've touched on several topics, starting from what is needs analysis as a quick reminder of what it is within the context of an ESP course and the preparation that goes into making decisions and choices when you're doing your curriculum design and you're doing your syllabus, everything that happens before. This is a roadmap. Basically, that's it. You gather your data points, you use a spreadsheet to organize, you analyze and summarize the findings, you write up the summary, and you reflect on the process. And after you've done that, you can start working on your curriculum design and doing your syllabus. That's it. That's your roadmap right there. So whenever we talk about, oh, well, I need to do my needs analysis, this is what we're talking about right here. Everything that I've talked about, everything I've commented on I observed throughout this video lecture, that's it. That's what we mean. That's what it represents. That is what the job is of an ESP course designer. That's what we need to do. Okay, so hopefully this video lecture here has been helpful for you in your practices as you're doing your ESP course design, you're doing your curriculum, you're doing your syllabus, and once you have that, it's just developing the content, doing the worksheets, doing the exercises, the practices. On the side there, you want to have your approaches, your methodologies in place, so that is going to indicate also the characteristics of lesson plan, of your didactics in general. And with this information, everything you're doing is evidence based. I've said this many times throughout this video lecture. It has to be context based, it has to be evidence based. And it's one of the key particularities of an ESP course. Otherwise, if it is not evidence based, if it's just on a gut feeling, then it can be qualified as an EGP course, as an English for General Purposes course, which is your standard English course that you can find on any language centered. And what we're talking about here is not that. Great. So that's going to be a wrap up for this video lecture. Hopefully it has clarified many questions and doubts that you've had. And that's it. I will see you next time.